Everyday Inclusion and Belonging, where we talk about literally everything under the sun that relates to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. This is the last day of Pride 2023, and I'm excited to have Gina Weekly joining me for this day when there's just so much happening in the world. I am Mo. I am the founder of the Moxie Exchange and Everyday Inclusion app. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a white woman. I've got red mid-length hair, gave myself some bangs because why not? I'm wearing red frames, a slightly 70s looking gauzy shirt, and behind me is my bookshelf with some of my favorite things, books and photos and tchotchke. Gina and I met almost a year ago.
Yep.
And it was one of those moments where it's like, well, we're going to be best friends forever. Just in terms of who she is as a human being, how she approaches her work, and was thrilled when she said yes to being on Everyday Inclusion. So Gina, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you, Mo. Thank you.
Okay, so I have really appreciated working together over the past year and how you approach this work. You are a Black gay woman doing DEI work in the Midwest. And I have appreciated everything that you have accomplished, gotten done, your approach. And I want to talk about all of those things. So that folks can take a couple of pages from your book. So I know that you have really seen DEI as a way and a vehicle for culture change. And I would love to hear kind of how you think it can be that the driver, it's sort of either a starting point or spoke in a hub, just even how you think about that.
Yeah, so thank you again, Mo, in the Moxie Exchange, for everything that you do. One, in the way that you create space for people in general. Like, you're just a great human, so thank you. Honestly, as I thought about this question and I think about this work, it absolutely is the thing that will drive culture change, be the driver of culture change. And the reason I say that is because I feel like, we've had so many years where people have tried to develop systems and policies and just things to make cultures better or workplaces thrive. And then we forgot the most important piece. And that's the humans, right? And when at the heart of DEI work is the human. It's getting back to allowing people to be themselves, allowing people to show up, right? Allowing people to operate in their talents and gifts rather than be binded by these rules, these systems, these policies that keep us in a box and keep us from, our creative geniuses, if you will, that keep us from being innovative and honestly oppress us. So when I think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, at the heart of it is belonging, like creating those spaces where people just feel like, hey, I'm welcome here. Hey, I'm a contributor here, right? And hey, I bring value to this place that I work. And when we do that, that's when culture starts to shift. It doesn't matter, money matters, right? For some people, but everybody, that's not a driver. But at the heart of every human is to feel safe, is to feel like you belong, and is to feel like you are contributing to something.
What's interesting is I've mentioned this in the past. So if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what is really interesting is his last work before he died was in companies. Like many people don't know this, like Southwest Airlines, the Army,
Mm.
And when you think about that hierarchy of needs, right? Safety, right? And food and clothing, right? And then it's belonging, right?
Yep.
Is there a place? I often recommend the book, and I don't think I've recommended it in a while, is Chip Conley's book, Peak, how companies get their mojo from Maslow. And I will put that in, I'll put that in the chat. And it's interesting because I haven't read it in, I don't know, probably 5-10 years, but it was interesting to me as I was reading it. And now I'd like to read it again with a much more DEI focused
Right.
lens as I'm reading it, because it really is about how do you create these places where people are thriving.
Yep.
And I think, I think it's interesting because we're seeing right now a lot of so much backlash. And we're seeing things like yesterday's Supreme Court decision. And then there was another decision that came down today that was actually based in a business here in Colorado, right? That we are now going to allow discrimination, right? Companies that say, no, I don't want to do business with you because you're LGBTQ plus. So we're taking these steps backwards in a time, right, where the work has been politicized, right? There's some and what I have appreciated is like your steadiness through all of this. And so I'd like to just hear like how you're taking that approach, particularly when you're introducing something new. Because I know in many organizations, you have come in and been the first.
Yep.
And have been building an entire strategy and approach. So, how do you approach building the strategy, or even if it's more programmatic, right? You're rolling out a solution. How do you approach that?
Yeah. And honestly, as a learner, naturally, I used to think that, oh, this has to be some complex system, right? Like it's got to be something well thought through. And then it just hit me. It was like, Gina, give the people what they want, give the people what they need, right? And so in thinking about that, I oftentimes considered, how did it feel for you as an employee in a space? You knew that like you couldn't operate openly. You knew that, you were treated different in situations. What could have happened differently for you? And honestly, the one question that I always ask myself, or the answer that I gave to myself to that question was, I just wish people would have listened. Like the space to give people voice is so powerful. And, in my current role, some people were like, it's like you have some magical gift. I was like, it's not a magical gift. It's just a lost art. Like we don't give people space to just speak, right? And just be in their gifts, in their passions, and their strengths. And there's so much power in that. Like the people that you hire will figure things out for you if you just give them the opportunity. So a lot of the things that I curate or that, I put together, it comes from actually listening to the people that I work with, right? There's not a lot genius about that besides tapping into the genius that everyone has around us. And often times we believe when we get into this role of diversity, equity, and inclusion, because sometimes in companies it's siloed, right? It becomes a department. We feel like we have to do it by ourselves. And that's where we get it wrong. Because if you don't get people to buy in or want to have conversation and dialogue with you about it, you're not going to get much done, right? So it's oftentimes, I spend a lot of time just listening, because the people will tell you, their struggles. The people will tell you what they need. And then most times people will give you a solution. But we just don't take that time.
It's interesting. And Lindsay Millett Glass interviewed her 2 weeks ago, I think. And she was saying the same thing, Gina. right? And I love that
Really?
you said this isn't magic, it's a lost art.
Yep.
And there's a patience that means slowing down,
Yes.
right? Instead of just barreling forward and we have to show progress, we have to show progress, we have to, right? What you're saying is stop, listen, the genius is around you.
Yep.
You know, and I think what occurs to me as you're saying that too is around the how this work has been politicized.
Yep.
I think that there is space to listen to some of that fear, right? I think
Yes.
the fear that's driving the backlash.
Yes.
So to engage in the folks that, you know, are saying be anti-woke or, you know, whatever, just outright rejecting, you know, it was interesting. We had a not conversation with a senior leader at an organization who somebody on Moxie's team had reached out. They've been in email conversation, and you know, we're just saying, you know, would love to chat about, you know, inclusive selling. And his response was, hell no. Inclusion shouldn't exclude, right? And it was like this knee-jerk reaction that it's like, so what's behind that, right? So then obviously that's somebody that we're not, right, not in deep conversation with yet. We don't hold the space with him to have that conversation. But I think about if you're having that internally in your organizations, that's a time to listen.
Yep. Yep. And being in Iowa, right, and with legislation that continues to come on, you know, multiple demographics, there is that constant, like you said, is that fear. And what I've discovered is that most times the driver of fear is the lack of knowledge as well. Oftentimes people hear, you know, we anchor in a headline that we hear, or we anchor in a social media post that we saw, and we allow that fear to consume us rather than taking a moment, pausing, reading the document or reading whatever it is truly, and interpreting it for ourselves, and taking a moment to really consider how is this going to affect you personally? And then how will it affect the systems that we're navigating? I think about, like, in Iowa, it was House File 802, where everybody made the assumption that they were trying to ban DEI from happening, you know, in educational entities. And it just, once I actually read the House file, I was like, this is exactly what society is set up to do, right? Trap us into that fear, keep us there, because we won't read. Like, as a people, like, we won't read. Just dig into things, ask questions.
That's back to that patience too.
Yes, we want it, and it all stems from, like, our biases, right? Like, we act without even figuring it out because we're so busy, or we're so this or that. And sometimes we just have to take a pause. And I've had a lot of people ask me, like, hey, G, how are you coping? Like, knowing that this legislation is happening, like, you know, your marriage may be in question, your livelihood, right? And I was like, you know what? I was like, this probably isn't the answer that you're expecting, but I'm operating in my circle of control. There are things that I can control. The work that I do matters. And if I get so riled up by those things that I cannot control, that are out of my control, I'm not doing you any good. I'm not doing me any good. And the space that I can influence change won't happen. And I was like, and honestly, what I do every day, I show up as a gay woman, fully clothed, right? I'm not hiding who I am. That's courage. That's bravery. I'm not, denouncing my wife, my child, our home, our family. I am being an example of what this looks like, right? And oftentimes society has developed this idea of what LGBTQ plus people are, how they look and how they operate. This is me. And you can't hate. One of my friends said this yesterday. I had another session and she said, if we just took the time to get to know people, you can't hate what you love. And that was so powerful. And I was just like, you're right.
Absolutely. In every single one of, so folks, one of the things that we have in the Everyday Inclusion app are inclusion interviews. And we're asking people, so it's like a living library, right? Of people sharing what makes them feel included and like they belong. What do they wish people would stop doing? Language. And every single person, Gina, this because you've watched them, says, get to know me.
Yep.
Right? If you just get to know me, and stop making these assumptions and just get to know me. And that's a part of that listening, right? And that's a part of and I think that's, again, I love what you're saying, because you're not just talking about listening to the marginalized. You're talking about literally listening to everybody, right? And then what is the approach? What is the genius that is there in terms of what does this look and what does this look and feel like for everybody?
Yep.
Because the other piece that we have, and I think it's going to be interesting to see that we have in the app, is the section around politics. That's not about taking a political stance. It's about how do you not let the external noise impact what's happening on your team. And I think I love what you were saying in terms of what can I control? Because I think and this right now, I'm just going to talk to the practitioners. If we are worried, if we are giving our energy and attention to all the things, we can't do anything. I was in conversation with some people yesterday after affirmative action was struck down by the Supreme Court. And I said, it can feel like whack-a-mole, right? Or whack-a-racist, homophobe,
yep.
Right. Misogynist, depending on and you have to, what can I influence?
Yep.
Where do I have expertise? Where can I have impact? And focusing there, because otherwise it does feel like taking on the world. I was speaking at a conference a couple of weeks ago with DEI leaders, and one of the panels, Gina, I really appreciated was on DEI leadership fatigue. And we're going to have that same conversation at Moxie's fall conference. And I appreciated what one of the panelists said, and I think it was the chief diversity officer of a pharma company. I'll have to look and see. And she said, I can't fix Florida. And it was interesting because like the whole room, like everyone just went, oh, shit, I can't fix Florida.
Yeah.
And it was this, but what can I focus on? What can I control? So I appreciate you, Gina, saying that, right? Like the courage of you showing up every day, listening and focusing on what you can control. So how do you in all of this mix, we know that there are influencers.
Yep.
And I think one of the things that I've seen very consistently is most DEI leaders are not given systemic influence, right? So they have to figure out influence in other ways. I think it's one of the core skills and capabilities needed for doing this work. And I've seen you do this so well with such expertise. So how do you think about influencers and getting influence that you're not given, but that you create?
Yeah. I think it goes back again to creating those spaces of psychological safety, where people know, hey, I can show up, I can ask questions, I can say the thing that I think is dumb, right? Quote unquote dumb. I can maybe get it wrong, but it's going to be okay because we're going to talk it out. And as we began to lean in even to the app, right? I gave people the space to toy with it, right? To see what are things that you have questions about. Like, what are things that, really plague your mind, like that you're like, what is a microaggression? Right. And when you give people the space to dig into something and learn for themselves, they start to ask more questions. They want more of it. And you start to give them voice. So one of the things that I love to do is empower those around me, because oftentimes I'll say it, like I'll lead from the space of, I'm not the expert, especially in diversity, equity, and inclusion. You're the expert of you. You're the expert of your lived experience. You're the expert of how you show up. I'm just here to help guide you, right? A guide on the side. And when you give people that sort of power, you don't have to do the job anymore, right? Like they'll lead it out for you. You hear them then, hey, I just read this on the thing, and this is what I learned about this. When we say things like tribe, that could be harmful or hurtful to another person. And it just kind of spreads like wildfire. And I think sometimes we, as leaders, as practitioners, we feel like we have to lead the change. I believe we have to share the change, right? Like we got to share it, because if something happens to you tomorrow, who's going to pick up those pieces and continue on?
Yeah.
Those influencers. So we got to create that space and empower those people around us, give them those gifts that we have, those nuggets of learning that we have, and pass it on. And sometimes we don't do a good job of that as a society, because we get something new and, oh, this is mine. I'm going to develop the next bomb framework, right? And maybe it never happens. And then, dang, there's a lost chance at change.
Yeah.
So when I get things, I'm sharing it. And when you share it, when you first get it, there's a level of excitement. And when people feel that excitement, is contagious, right?
Yeah.
And it's sharing is caring, man. And I feel like everything I'm saying is super simple, but it works. Like it works. And
Well,
the
I
people
think
want it.
you said it, right? Like sometimes we try and make this so complex. And if we put humans again at the center, and I loved how you were saying, like, what did I need? Right. When I was feeling othered in a space. And again, what are those, the humans overall, right? What do we all need, right? To feel respected, to feel seen, to feel heard.
Yeah.
So how do we create that? And I love letting people like self-directed on this. I think I do think one of the things that is interesting in doing this work is, boy, the longer I do it, the less I know. I think the only way I can
So true. So true. It is so true.
Yeah. And so I think that there is this just staying so
Humble.
4-year-old curious and humble.
Yes. Yes. Yep.
Yeah, because
Curiosity.
I think really letting the people that are in our organizations know that, I think is so important, because otherwise it's like, oh, there's the DEI lady, like I don't want to say or do the wrong thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about this, but I would love to know how or if being an out gay woman impacts how you approach the work.
Woo, absolutely. Like, without a doubt. I navigate a lot of small town spaces. And it's like you said, it can be very draining, but I intentionally lead from the space of vulnerability, storytelling. I try to not use big terms, right? Using those big DEI words that we think really matter, at the heart of it is it's allowing those people to get to know me from jump. Because again, you can't hate what you love. And if I'm telling you a story of the kid Gina, and I'm telling you some of those things that I went through, and in the same hand, I'm telling you that people just like you is what made me overcome or helped me overcome, that, you know, helped push me into a space of resiliency. How can you not want to be connected to that, right? If I'm telling you that you are the antidote, right? That you have the gift to help people come out of depression, anxiety, you know, thoughts of suicide, why wouldn't you want to be that person? And you know, that's very exhausting, because I'm reliving entities and trauma almost every day, so that I can get others to just feel safe, right? To be okay with who I am. And if that's what I have to do to see the change in my world, you know, my space, because I believe wholeheartedly one person can change the world. And that world may just be the people that you engage with every single day. It's a ripple effect. That person is going to go and they're going to tell the Gina story, or they're going to tell their story. But what I've learned is that my story isn't for me. And most times, when we've gone through struggles, we believe that, you know, we got to hold that in. Like, and I believe that society has designed it and shaped us this way. Like, leave all that soft stuff in there. And I'm telling you to do the opposite, because the more that I started to share, and I talked about, you know, my ACEs, my adverse childhood experiences, and the trauma that I've experienced, it's also liberating, right? But people connect to that. Like, whoa, she went through that and she's here in front of a room full of 300 people. I can do that. Like, I can tell them, my neighbor, you know what I mean? And it's just leading from that space of humanness, transparency, vulnerability. And people tap into that. Like, people want to be a part of that. It's not like, I believe wholeheartedly that we can't see change in the DEI space if we are, you know, pointing fingers, pointing blame, right? It has to be an inside out job. We have to lead from a space of saying, hey, I don't get this right all the time, right? I operate as a gay woman. I'm married to a woman, but I might say things that offend other people who identify as LGBTQ. And it's just leading from that space of, like you said, humility, curiosity. But what you see is what you get. And I think sometimes we've had so much happen to us and we've done so many things that we feel like we can't show up. And it's that self-work. What are you hiding? Stop hiding those stories. Your story might be somebody else's saving grace. Right. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in systems and policies that, again, we just forget that we're people. At the root of it, yes, I'm a gay woman, but I'm just Gina, right? Like, I'm just a kid from the east side of Waterloo that wants to see my world be a better place.
Yep.
We probably went way around the bend and back again there.
No. I'm just like, I'm taking it in, Gina. That was beautiful. So thank you. And it's interesting, you talked about ripple effect, and I don't know if you see behind me, we've got
Ripple.
yeah, so we've got the wave, because that's what we talk about here is, right, the small ripples that become that positive tsunami.
Yes.
Right, where you're saying somebody takes Gina's story and tells Gina's story, and right, and what are people doing in their families? What are they doing in their communities? What are they doing in their, and I do think that that's why it is important in doing this work that we're sharing with other people doing the work, the ripples that we've created. because it can be, as you were saying, like you're having to relive trauma, Gina, like that's, and I was glad to hear you say that is also liberating, because otherwise I don't want you sacrificing you for, right? Like, I think that's why we're seeing so much burnout in this space, because we have to make sure that we're replenishing.
Yeah, we have to be sure. And any workshop that I do, like one of the biggest focus is wellness. Like
Mhm.
we can't lead this work. You can't do this work without taking care of you.
Yeah.
Because when you're in a space of exhaustion, burnout, right? Like it's not good for anybody. You're a ticking time bomb. So
Yeah.
of course we're going to leave from that space of bias. We're going to leave from that space of, we're not questioning, oh, is bias at play here when we're exhausted?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
we're just operating. So taking care of us and making sure that you have at least 2 to 3 people that you can depend on to just, hey, I need you to just listen. Hey, I need some feedback, right? And making sure that you have those people. Can I bounce this off of you? Like this happened today, and take care of you.
Yeah.
Take your days, right? Like do what you need to do to be whole, because the world needs you.
Mm.
Like our world needs people like us to show up. But if we're also not taking care of ourselves, we can't show up.
Mm. Ooh, there's been so much in this conversation. Will you leave me with one last truth bomb?
Yeah. So I've been thinking about this. And my wife says this a lot of times because when we were, in the process of getting married, there were some folks in her family that didn't agree. And she says oftentimes, if you don't want to see me happy, close your eyes. And I was like, oh, right. So that's my one last truth bomb. Thank you to Aisha Weekly. If you don't want to see the people around you, you have the gift to just shut your eyes, right? So if you don't want to see those people happy and operating in what brings them joy, close your eyes. Don't go yucking other people's yum. Don't go raining on other people's parade. Just close your eyes, and you don't have to see it.
And boy, to close your eyes against somebody else's happiness. You have to get real intentional about your stuff then.
Right. Absolutely. But I was like, whoa, that's powerful. Because you don't have to engage, like you don't have to look, right? Just shut your eyes.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Happy Pride.
Yes. Yes. Happy Pride. Thank you for being an amazing ally.
Well, and thank you for the work you do and for showing up every day as you, right? Fully, authentically you. The world is a better place because of you, Gina. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mo.
All right, y'all. We will see you soon on Everyday Inclusion and Belonging. Get out there and do the next right thing. Show up authentically as you. Do the deep listening. Be vulnerable. I'm just going through all the hits that you went through, Gina. We will see you all soon. Cheers.
Yes.